Hey everyone, this is Kieran from MSK Physio, and today's exercise we're looking at the Bulgarian split squat and some variations of. It's a very popular exercise for getting some strength back into one leg, but also you need to consider the back leg, and so we go over a lot of considerations around that. Things maybe that you'd want to do or not do at certain times of your rehab, or just depending on what you're trying to focus on. So if you've heard of this exercise or you're looking for an exercise that's going to strengthen one of your legs really well, then this is the exercise for you. So when we're thinking about loading up one leg, what we need to consider are kind of the variables around what about that leg we're trying to load. And that sounds kind of vague to start, but maybe you've had like a calf injury, and so you have an issue with decelerating yourself into dorsiflexion or pronation. Maybe you've had a knee injury and you struggle to get terminal knee extension and push off, or maybe you struggle to get into knee flexion and shock absorb. Or maybe you could have some hip stuff and you've got rotational capacities up here, you've got sideways capacities, and you've got forward and back capacities. So when we're loading up one leg, we need to think about all these different things and what the focus is for you. The cool thing is there's a lot of exercises that tackle many of these things at once. You just need to be sort of aware of the variable of interest. One of the exercises I use a lot is a Bulgarian split squat, but I modify it depending on what we're trying to focus on. So the traditional one that most people are going to come across is where the back leg is raised quite high on maybe a traditionally sized bench like this. So we're talking about raised up like this and then being able to go down and up. I'll show you from this side as well. So being able to go down and up. Now you might have the toes like this, you might have them plantar flex this way, but the ability to come down in these positions and go up and down. This is really good, it's fine, but you also need to have hip extension ability on the back. And we're not talking about necessarily a passive flexibility, like you're like, oh, I can do the couch stretch against a wall, or I can do a big lungy hip flexor stretch. You still may not be able to do this because there's a strength element to the flexibility at the front of this back thigh. The ability for that thigh to load under tension as it lengthens. So you could use this to strengthen up that ability, or you might have to do something more specific. And if that's the case, maybe have a look at some of our hip flexor videos and building strength there, particularly at end range. Other things to think about are when people try and load the front leg. They're like, okay, I really want to load up my quadriceps on this side. And this is a really good exercise for that because there's a lot of range coming and it's very focused on the front leg. And I have to create a lot of knee extension. So large range from a large depth. If someone has a restriction back here, then typically I'll get them to shorten up. Trouble is we get some bench restrictions. And if someone's like, well, I want to get some more depth, then we go to a smaller box. You could use a box, you could use a step. But what it means then is this angle here, I don't have to worry as much about the hip extension ability on this back leg. So I can go down and I can really just focus on loading this front leg up and down. Coming from the front, looks very much like this. Trying to maintain sort of a sagittal movement or a forward and back movement at the knee. I'm not thinking too much about it. I'm just trying to lower myself down and get back up. By nature of going deeper, your hip's going to have to internally rotate a little bit. And so instead of it looking like the knee going in, you'll see the hip go out to the side that way. Good movement to have. We're not talking about creating this bowed out thing this way. It's not the movement that happens when you go into hip flexion and into a knee flexion or a pronation, that sort of trifecta of shock absorption. It's just not what happens. When we get external rotation, that's when our leg's behind us. There's an element of external rotation here, but it's the internal rotation that'll limit depth. If you're not sure about all that, what that means, have a look at some of our internal rotation videos at the hip. So, some other things to consider are what the spine might do during this movement. Now, most people are going to load this up with some dumbbells. So they'll hold on to some dumbbells And I'll just go for some light ones to start with. Holding them side by side. Some people might opt to use a barbell. That's fine as well. I like the dumbbells because it just takes, if someone has a shoulder mobility issue, it takes that requirement out of it as well. So the ability to get back here. So again, we can focus really on this front leg if that's your focus. Otherwise, I would be looking at what your thoracic spine's up to. And the reason they get you to focus on the thoracic spine is a lot of people are going to do a shoulders back position. They're going to do this, creating a retraction in their shoulder blades and a thoracic extension, or maybe a pseudo, that maybe they're actually kyphosed and they're just retracting their shoulder blades thinking that they're extending through the thoracic spine. I'd encourage you to go for more of a kyphosis. So hug the medicine ball. You could use a Swiss ball, just something to get your hands around. You can see that that curve comes into my back. It means that because this curve is flexed or kyphotic, this lower back has to be a little more lordotic, just to balance out the length tension curves. And it's just going to change the exercise a lot. It's going to make you load a lot differently through the legs. It's probably going to give you a little more flexibility and some of that hip extension, but it'll also allow you to get into a little bit more of our sort of shock absorption of that internal rotation of the hip, the knee flexing, the tibial internal rotation, and into that pronation at the foot. A controlled pronation though, right? So we're coming into it from a supinated position. If you're not sure what all that means, again, we got videos for that. I'm not trying to repeat all that stuff, but I just want to repeat the same knowledge where we already have good content for. So I'm hugging, and I'm just not losing that spinal position as I come back up and down. All right? So lots of different variations. Not saying that some are worse or better. It just depends on what your goals are. And if you're not sure what you should focus on, then that's when you should, get the help of a local therapist. If you're local to where we are, you can always get in touch with us. Or there's lots of other videos online to help you educate you about these things and when they might be relevant. But it can be used for all sorts of things: ankle, shoulder, knee, hip, spinal. It's really up to you and how you choose to load it and how you choose to position yourself. But it's just a really nice option, I find, primarily for learning how to load the front leg. I think there's better exercises for developing the leg being behind you. I think there's better exercises for things like your shoulders, especially if you do like loaded carries, for example. But really good exercise for learning to load that front leg again, particularly for quad development after like an ACL rehab. Really, really good exercise. So giving you a few ideas to play with and some thoughts around maybe the bench height and what that might do for you, and also the distance of your feet from each other. Again, this is fine, but do you have the hip flexibility to be able to do this while maintaining an upright posture? And if you don't have that, then you come into a shorter step and lower the thing behind you. Okay? Alternatively, for the very final sort of variation, which is quite nice, is you can sit yourself onto a step. And what that does is it really takes out that hip extension requirement on the back leg. A bit more of an offset than a true split squat, but gives you some ideas to play with. So if you like it, if you have questions, please let us know. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, then please hit like below. Otherwise, to check out more of our content in the future, you can subscribe to our channel by clicking our logo over here. And to check out our latest video, click up here.